Hello everyone, welcome back. Tom with Capo Fetish. So when we talk about mid to late 60s music, basically rock and roll, classic rock, what do you prefer, mono mixes or stereo mixes? People get into heated discussions about this topic. I prefer from about 65 onward stereo mixes. I think it's more expansive. I like hearing more of an expansive mix, but there are exceptions, which I'm going to talk about right now. These are some of my favorite mono mixes from the mid to late 60s. I'm going to start it off here with an album I picked up a while back, maybe about 10 years ago. And it's the mono mix of Traffic's Heaven Is In Your Mind. This is the US version of Mr. Fantasy, the UK version of Mr. Fantasy. You have the singles Hole in My Shoe, and you have Paper Sun on this album that were left off the UK version, plus a few other oddities that were left off the UK version. So I picked this up just because I was going through an actual little mono phase. I wanted to see what the difference was between the mono and the stereo. And I was really taken aback by some of the mixes on this particular version here, this mono mix, especially the track Giving to You, right? On the stereo version, there's all this gibberish in the beginning of the track. It sounds like a cocktail party, and there's dishes clanging, maybe glasses, wine glasses, and then there's all this blah, 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 all this gibberish going on. And then the track kicks in, and it's like this jazzy little thing going on, and then it ends the same way it starts, with all this gibberish, you know. And then when I listen to this mono version, it almost sounds like a completely different track. It starts off with Steve Winwood doing this kind of intro with his voice, kind of a vocal intro, and then it gets into the track, and it sounds like a completely different track. It has the same kind of feel, but you don't really hear Chris Wood and any of the woodwind instruments going on in there. It sounds completely different. So I actually prefer this version better, not just because of that track, but just because of the overall mix. I think you hear a lot more in the mono mix. Steve Winwood's voice is more up front. The mixes are more up front. Nothing against the stereo version, but I just think the mono mix has more to offer. And I was really, really pleasantly surprised by what I heard when I first heard the mono mix of this. Also, the track Dealer has an extended outro, which is really cool as well. So really highly recommended if you can find this version of Heaven Is In Your Mind. Again, this is the UK version of Mr. Fantasy. This was also released as Mr. Fantasy later down the line in the US. I don't know which one came out first, whether in the US, whether it was Mr. Fantasy or Heaven Is In Your Mind. Same track listing, pretty much everything, except the mono mix is really different, and I highly recommend this if you've never heard this version. Fantastic. Another one too that really, for me, blows away the stereo version is Fairport Convention's Legion Leaf, their last album with Sandy Denny. I picked this up years ago, back in the 80s. I wasn't even aware this was a mono version. It's on the original Island label, the pink label. And as you can see in the very top, if you can see very up close there, it's the mono version. And this too packs a lot of punch too. Sandy Denny's voice just sounds more up front. She sounds like she's playing in the living room for you. The instruments are more clear. I don't know. It just, I have the CD version, which is the stereo version, and I think this mono version here from 69 is fantastic. And I think it's extremely rare at this point. So highly recommended if you can find it. Legion Leaf by Fairport Convention, the mono version. Another one too that blew me away when I bought this 45, I bought it on eBay years ago, is the single version of Jumpin' Jack Flash by the Stones. Now, I was used to the version on Hot Rocks all those years, and which was the stereo version. And then, of course, there was another version I listened to a lot on the singles collection. But this mono version of this 45 really, really packs a wallop. Even on like a cheap, old, little silver tone 45 player, it sounds amazing, just blaring out of the speakers. The guitars sound more raw, in your face. Mick Jagger's voice, the backup vocals, it's just fantastic. And ditto for the flip side, Child of the Moon, same thing, just really, really great mix. And I've heard the mono mixes on CD, and I don't know if it's just my ears or whatever, but this particular single version, mono version of Jumpin' Jack Flash is the best version I have ever heard this song. No other version I've ever heard even compared to the punch and pack and wallop of this particular version. Buffalo Springfield again. This is, I believe, a first version, a first edition version of this album in mono I bought years ago for 99 cents. And this too, really, for me, for my ears, blows away the stereo version. My problem with the stereo version all the years down the line has been lousy remastering. And I'm not one of those people that's really hardcore on like remastering and remixing and everything, but there's an obvious difference here between this this first pressing here, this mono mix, and later stereo pressings. The first chords that ring out on Mr. Soul, you can tell the difference between this and the stereo version. It's just right in your face, rocks, all the songs just really, really are up front, really bright, fantastic. If you could ever get a first pressing of this album, Buffalo Springfield again, pick it up. It is fantastic. I picked up the Buffalo Springfield box set years ago, which I think Neil Young remastered all the 3 albums. At least the first 2 albums I think were in stereo and mono. Even those remastered versions don't even compare to this first version of this mono version. So again, I still have yet to hear a version of Buffalo Springfield again that sounds as exciting and enticing as this first edition of mono, Buffalo Springfield again. So that's another one. Another one is the Kinks Face to Face. This is the only version I heard growing up, and I thought it sounded great. Later versions I heard of the stereo version, I didn't think sounded as good as the mono version. I think everything is more up front here, more clear, and I prefer the mono version. Now, in contrast, years back, I bought the mono version of Arthur, and I thought it sounded lousy. And the stereo version, to me, was way better than the mono version. So I guess it really just depends on our ears. And again, I prefer the mono version of Face to Face to the stereo version. And when it comes to the Beatles, from 65 onward, I prefer mainly stereo versions of their albums. I think there's a huge difference when it comes to the Help album. Mono version of Help, I think, really, really pales in comparison to the stereo version, especially the title track Help. It just lacks punch and authority, But the stereo version is just right in your face. So it just really comes down to the ears, right? How we hear things, right? But I'll tell you one thing. Nothing can compare to this mono single version of Paperback Writer. First of all, the guitar is just in your face, just blaring out of the speakers. It sounds so amazing. And that guitar sound is one of the greatest guitar sounds. That whole Revolver guitar sound with, Rain, Paperback Writer, She Said, especially She Said, is one of my favorite guitar sounds of all time. Just incredible. But this one too, with the, they add a little bit of echo on the, what would you call it? The, as they say, Paperback Writer, as it kind of like extends out before they start singing Paperback Writer. There's that kind of Paperback Writer. There's like this little bit of echo, little bit of like what do we say, vibrato going on, which is really cool that you don't have on the stereo version. Ditto for Rain on the flip side, great mono version compared to the stereo version. So yeah, I don't think any stereo version for my taste can compare to the mono version of Paperback Writer. It just blows it away. Now, years ago, or it wasn't that long ago, I was at a used record store locally here in Thousand Oaks, California, and I noticed there was this Velvet Underground and Nico mono version there, a brand new version, and it had a little hype sticker saying, "Finally, the original mono version. Limited edition." So I thought, I'll pick it up. I've only heard the stereo version. Love this version better than the stereo version. I think a band like Velvet Underground, especially the first 2 albums, this one and White Light, White Heat, really benefit from the mono mix. It's because, these albums are more raw sounding, It just has more of in-your-face kind of feel, especially with the rockers, like I'm Waiting for the Man, and There She Goes Again, and Run, Run, Run. Those really, really pack a punch on the mono mixes for me compared to the stereo versions. So another great one in mono here, Velvet Underground and Nico. Another one too is a world of difference between the stereo version, to my ears at least, is Love's de Capo. This is an original first pressing in mono that I picked up years ago from a garage sale, I believe. And the whole first side just sounds really, really amazing. Especially the song Orange Skies. It sounds really up close and personal and in your face compared to the stereo version. Songs like 7 Is and The Castle, She Comes in Colors, ditto for all those as well. Way more up front. I way more prefer the mono version to the stereo version of this particular album. And then last but not least, well, we have a couple more actually. The Byrds, Notorious Byrd Brothers, Sundays, the Sundays label years back, released I think their first 4 or 5 albums in mono. And I love this mono version of Notorious Byrd Brothers. I think this has more presence than the stereo version. I was just listening to this the other day, especially songs like Artificial Energy, way more punch. Songs like Tribal Gathering, way more in your face. Changes Now. I prefer the mono version of this album than the stereo. And then last but not least, another one, at least for side 2 for me of this, I love the way, I don't know what it is about this. It has a different vibe than the stereo version. The side 2 of Bringing It All Back Home by Bob Dylan, especially Mr. Tambourine Man, I think sounds better than the stereo version. And the whole side 2, Gates of Eden, very, very personal and more up close for me. And I just always love this album, especially side 2. And again, love the mono version. So these are just my personal opinions. I'm not really a mono aficionado. I prefer stereo, but there are those exceptions. So let me know what your favorites are from the mid to late 60s in mono. I'd love to know. Thanks as always for watching. Have a great 4th of July, and we'll see you soon. Take care. And if you haven't already, just please press the subscribe button. I'd appreciate it. If you dig the content, thanks as always. Take care. Bye-bye.